Okay, welcome back to part two of week 10, GBMT 1009 on the European Union and Brexit. In the last part, we discussed a little bit about the EU, its history, and our final example, we discussed how the EU was a necessity for exchanging goods within a common market, and we discussed a toaster example. So if you go back to the slides, you can see that as well. Um, so over time, the EU grew in membership as well as its responsibilities. It started with 6 members, and then by 1995, there were 15. And by 2004, there was the largest enlargement to 25 with the addition of post-communist states in Eastern Europe. And just before Brexit, which we'll go into in a little bit, there was 28 member states. And with the UK leaving in 2016, there's now 27. Equally important is the transformation and the responsibilities of the European Union as an institution, namely the development of a common currency, which we call the euro. They needed to eliminate the shifting currencies of each state in Europe, which slowed the market and led to various distortions in the price of goods across borders. So states needed to abandon often very old currencies in order to enter this new monetary system. This also has its disadvantages, as countries could no longer independently control their monetary system, thus removing a major aspect of sovereignty as it is historically understood. And sovereignty, again, is the ability to steer their own economic system and their own political systems within a specific territory. So we know that Canada right now is obviously worried, Canada and many other Western states, about rising inflation. Well, the Canadian state has the sovereignty over its monetary system, so it can reduce the supply of Canadian dollars to the world, thus reducing inflation. These countries within the European Union cannot independently control that lever. Rather, it goes through the European Central Bank. This equates to a large loss in sovereignty for these states, right? So we can see here that there are states that use the euro or eurozone. In yellow are the countries that use the euro in this map here. Some countries do not use the euro, namely Sweden and Denmark. And then you have countries such as Poland, Czech, and Romania who want the euro, but have not met certain standards, right? So you look at these states, you can see the Eurozone and the states that are not within the Eurozone. Again, I recommend taking a close look at this map because this is another a good tidbit of knowledge to have if you're going to engage in global business as a career, right? Okay, so the Schengen space is all the countries within the mainland of Europe, not including Ireland, which have removed physical borders. This means you do not need to stop and show papers between countries. So you can go across, hypothetically, without even knowing you're crossing a border if you're not paying attention. Having this kind of free movement, right, of people across borders requires a high level of trust between countries. You could be in the country without anyone really knowing you're there, right? If you travel from France to Belgium, etc. Within the Schengen space, then you need a massive amount of trust between each member of, and their security services, specifically for travelers to the initial state of entry, right? So if you come from a non-European Union state, and then you come to France, and then from France you go to Belgium, this requires a large amount of trust in each other's systems, especially their security systems, if there's a threat of terrorism, et cetera, right? They all have a common environmental policy within this zone as well, to ensure similar standards. The common agricultural policy, which has been controversial since the 1960s, determines how much of each good and where of how much of each good is produced and where agriculture is produced. So in certain places, they prevent farmers from growing certain things to keep a competitive balance, right? They also cooperate regarding refugees and immigration. And they have some common security institutions, but not as integrated there as some would like to see it. Um, they also contribute collectively in democratization, um, which has been a major issue for EU states, specifically in Eastern Europe. So it's beyond a common market and unified trading policy here, right? So when we see all this integration, we're left wondering, did it work? Well, yes. 2% of the world's land mass. The EU makes up 2% of the world's land mass and less than 10% of its population, but it's responsible for almost 17% of its GDP, or about $17 trillion. The power of individual states, specifically weaker nations within the EU, is a persistent problem, as it is a system where there's 27 members, each with unique interests, all of which the institutions of the European Union must answer to. Uh, and if you need to have negotiations regarding trade, you must negotiate with each member state. Nonetheless, only one out of 27 member states have opted to leave the union since its inception, which is a sign of success, right? The EU is also a major player in world affairs. We can see this especially with what's happening right now in Ukraine, uh, with the EU taking a key role. Uh, and the EU itself is becoming a major pole in what we could call an increasingly multipolar world, which we've kind of discussed in previous weeks, where it's no longer a situation like the Cold War, for example, where you have bipolarity, two great superpowers, or the unipolarity of the United States immediately following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War. We're increasingly coming to a field, a geopolitical field of multipolarity, multiple poles, right? Most importantly, the EU brought peace to the nations of Europe, a territory that spent many centuries in constant conflict and two world wars in the 20th century. So it helped rebuild Europe after these conflicts, of course, with the help of the Marshall Plan and the funding from the United States to help rebuild Europe after World War II as well, which was a large contributing factor. But that nonetheless, the European Union did have some success in the sense that we have not seen a major conflict within Europe, or at least between European EU states since World War II, right? So that alone, massive success. That being said, there are some major issues which in recent years have caused some serious problems for the European Union and have the potential for threatening its future. The 2008 world economic collapse hit many European Union countries very hard. Not as bad as Greece, which had been what's called cooking the books economically, giving false reports on its economic success to the EU as well as its own citizens. And this led to a collapse in the Greek economy, along with the economies of Ireland, Portugal, Spain. And this required the EU to bail out these economies in crisis, especially the Greek economy. And this led to a lot of resentment within the European Union, amongst other European Union states, feeling that they were sending their money and their resources to the Greek banks that were so mismanaged and corrupt, right? Similarly, Greeks resented the bailouts as they had a variety of conditions placed on the bailout packages, which limited their social services and their welfare states, including their pensions and education, and in order to pay back these loans. So we talked about previous weeks about the IMF and the World Bank placing certain conditions on the loans they give states. And this is what happened with the case of Greece, right? They needed this money because their economies were facing precipitous collapse. And because of this, they were given money from uh, the IMF, and in doing so, they required, and the EU paid a lot of money towards the Greek to rescue the Greek economy, and because of this, uh, they placed a lot of uh, conditions on these loans, which kind of uh, deteriorated Greece's historic welfare state and the services it can give its own citizens. We also see a rise in anti-immigration and far-right populist parties across Europe in recent years, believing that elites in Brussels, which is the EU headquarters, were controlling their nation states economically and politically, with the belief that these kind of Brussels-based, mostly Northern European-based elites were forcing things like increased immigration on states which did not wish to have more immigrants. We also see the rise of liberal or quasi-democratic states in the European Union, such as Hungary and Poland, where the rights of minority groups, such as the LGBTQ community and refugees, are increasingly under attack from far right-wing political leadership. Specifically, Viktor Orban in Hungary has come under scrutiny from the European Union for his illiberal policies in recent years. We see a refugee crisis and an inability for the European Union to humanely manage the influx of refugees coming from conflicts in Syria, North Africa, Belarus, and Afghanistan, likely also with the amount of refugees coming from the Ukraine conflict. And specifically Mediterranean states such as Italy and Greece, which are ill-equipped um, to deal with these influxes of refugees, are often left dealing with this crisis while also suffering their own economic hardships. So there hasn't been an equality in how each state has, how the European Union has managed this crisis of refugees, right? This has also caused a humanitarian crisis, as many of these refugees are forced to deal with criminal human smuggling networks and very often drown in the Mediterranean due to improper sea vessels bringing them across and the neglect of the European Union in dealing with this in an appropriate manner, right? There's also various issues concerning the geopolitical relationships that the EU has with Russia and China. It's also in long-term trade disputes with its long-term partner, the United States, especially under US President Donald Trump. So we can see here that the EU has crises that are both internal uh, within the European Union, as well as crises that are externally impinging on the European Union. So it has a variety of challenges for the 21st century that really do threaten this integration, the further integration of the European Union, as well as its what we mentioned before, the widening and deepening of this institution. And this all leads to Brexit in 2016, where the UK or United Kingdom decided to leave the European Union. The UK was the first to join after the original six in the European community in the late 70s. However, as soon as they joined, they had a referendum to leave. So membership has always been a sticky issue for the UK within the European Union. The United Kingdom has often not viewed themselves as European, but rather a bridge between Europe and North America. The UK never joined the Euro or the Schengen space, so they were always 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the European Union. They liked some of the things it had to offer, and they wanted some of the benefits of membership, but they always were skeptical of some of the major aspects, of the European Union. The referendum to leave the European Union was 51.9% to leave and 49.1% to remain. So it's very, very close. And the reason for leaving had a lot to do with immigration. The United Kingdom had a lot of people from Eastern Europe moving into the UK because of this free movement. And about 1 million Polish people moved to the UK. And UK citizens viewed this as a strain on their healthcare systems, their education, and their jobs market. They also believed they lost economic sovereignty to the European Union, and they also resented the limits on fishing for the United Kingdom under EU law. So they entered negotiations to leave, and these negotiations have been very hard. as they're very entangled within the EU economy, right? So it's very difficult to negotiate this exit. This has caused a great deal of problems for for the United Kingdom politically, as finding a deal that is acceptable has been a contentious issue. Nonetheless, a deal was signed, but a variety of aspects which are incomplete. For example, fishing remains contentious, specifically regarding what is European waters and what is United Kingdom waters. Also, the red tape and access to the European Union is a persistent issue, specifically for Brits who own property abroad. Also, which you'll see in some of the materials I provide this week in the weekly learning section, the border between Northern Ireland remains very problematic between Ireland proper and Northern Ireland. As years of conflict or troubles between, I'm sorry, I said Ireland proper, but the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which are two separate states, right? One is within the United Kingdom, one is within the Eurozone. As years of conflict or troubles, or what was called the troubles between Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Irish Protestants and the Catholics within the Republic of Ireland, it was largely calmed by an open border between Northern Ireland, which was part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, which is in the European Union. However, after Brexit, the status of this open border between these two states has been under threat, as the border must be a hard border in order for the UK to not be within the EU's common market, right? The Good Friday Accord says the border must stay open, but the EU common market says it must be closed because you can't have an open border with the United Kingdom, which is now no longer an EU member. The EU has argued that all of Ireland, including the Northern Ireland, must stay within the common market. However, the UK does not want 1/4 of its country under the EU common market. And nothing so far has satisfied all parties involved in these negotiations. So this is an extremely contentious issue, and it will continue to be a contentious issue in going forward in future years, right? Because you have you have a very tense political relationship that was kind of calmed by economic integration, and now you're reestablishing a hard border within these two very contentious ethno-political conflict, right? So the materials I provide this week will go into greater detail, but it's a very, very interesting issue, and it gets right at the heart of why this Brexit is so contentious. As a result of all this, Brexit has not gone very well. There's been labor shortages and people leaving the United Kingdom. People would work seasonally in the United Kingdom from the EU, but now they're not coming. And the UK is having difficulty finding people to do the labor, such as truck driving, hotel work, agricultural picking, etc. And these were all jobs, very interestingly, that the pro-Brexit people claimed that Eastern Europeans took away from Brits. But now they're having these labor shortages, and they're finding that UK citizens are not wanting to take these jobs that many were coming from other places within the European Union to fill, right, within the UK. As a result of Brexit, the UK is also more economically and politically isolated. It has more disputes with neighbors, which they once cooperated with, specifically France, which is right across the English Channel. This illustrates that as frustrated as states are with the European Union, there are massive consequences for exiting this union. Despite the issues with globalized trade, opting for nationalist solutions, like what happened with Brexit, once integrated within a large trading bloc, creates a whole host of consequences that many did not recognize when they voted to exit. A top search in the United Kingdom right before Brexit was, what is the EU? What is Brexit? And so quite interestingly, this indicates that many people who voted even for Brexit did not understand all the implications of exiting the European Union. That being said, the future of the EU is also very uncertain. While it is still a critical part of contemporary geopolitics, There are growing dissatisfactions displayed by EU members. For example, if the euro fails, many members will rethink European Union membership, especially if there's another round of bailouts. In recent months, the euro has fallen quite sharply, even as the US dollar faces its own issues. Uh, €1 was about $1.20 in US dollars about 6 months ago. Now it's less than $1 American. So this is a sharp decline in the value of the euro. So the EU then represents the limits of economic and political integration. All these contradictions that we're witnessing with the European Union and all the crises it's facing, um, it's something that other states are learning from as well, specifically states that might wish to seek to develop a similar type of trading bloc, right? The African Union, for example. So it provides a bunch of lessons about the limits of political, social, and economic integration beyond the nation state. So we'll end with some things to think about. So the EU kind of asks us these big questions of how much sovereignty can a state give up and still remain a country, a nation state? Um, if you don't have a national currency or hard borders, what makes you a country? Um, Especially when you have this homogenization also of culture and identity that happens just naturally through the processes of globalization, which we've discussed. We have to ask, will other regions wish to imitate the EU model, even despite all of its issues? Are the benefits of entering a large union like this worth it? If we can see, we've also discussed, I know we end on the note of all the crises and issues the EU currently faces, but then we have to also recognize its successes and the establishment of peace within Europe, which was historically unprecedented, right? So we can see here that there is also some things that other states might benefit from. You look at other regions that are filled with conflict. We can maybe think that greater economic and political integration in the Middle East might calm some of the tensions between the different states, right? So are the pros and do the pros outweigh the cons here when it comes to economic, political, and social integration? And what will happen to the UK going alone in the globalized world? So if we think of the UK as also kind of a laboratory test of what might happen if other states wish to exit the European Union and a large trading bloc, what are the consequences of this? Okay, so a reminder also that the G20 country profile is due soon. It's due on July 29th at 6 p.m. Barry time. So it's not this Friday, but the Friday after. Watch your sources and cite carefully using APA. Read the instructions carefully and answer all the questions asked. Remember that you must use a G20 country other than Canada, US, United Kingdom, or India. You may not use any of these 4 countries on your profile. List the sources at the end by alphabetical order, remember, and make sure you attach an academic honesty statement if you want a grade for this assignment. Try to use the sources that I've provided for you as well as much as possible. And I think that is all I have for this week. So just be sure you are reading your assignments over carefully, spending a little bit more time on this assignment than your accountability assignments because it's a much larger assignment. It's worth much more of your grade. So it's very important you take this assignment very seriously. Do your research, make sure you're setting materials appropriately. Many of you are having problems with punctuation. Remember, after an in-text citation, you put the period after the in-text citation within the sentence, right? There's been some grammar issues regarding where to put punctuation. So just make sure that you make sure you put your punctuation after your citation. Remember to not cite the entire source, just the author's name, date, and page number, if page numbers are even used. But if it's just author's name and the year is enough for an online source, etc. Do not put the entire title of the piece in the citation. Do not put the website in the in-text citation. That all goes into your list of references at the end. That being said, that's all I have for you this week. I wish you a wonderful rest of your week, and I look forward to reading all your assignments. I will have your last accountability assignment graded. Should be back to you this Friday, definitely before next Monday's class. So um, that's all I have for you today, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care, everyone.